Hello and welcome to the roof of Bush House here in London. In a few moments time I'm going to show you how to set up a Glensound and a laptop with your BGAN satellite dish. But first let's have a quick tour of your BGAN sat dish. On the side of the BGAN we have four inputs. The top input is for your power supply, and that's normally a black cable similar to this which goes into the top. As well as providing the power, it also charges the battery. There are also three other inputs. The top one is a USB socket for connecting a laptop. We're not going to use that one today. The next one down is the Ethernet socket, and that's the one we will use for the laptop. And the bottom one is for connecting your ISDN Glensound unit. Moving around now, at the top we have the battery compartment. To remove the battery, open the plastic clip like so, slide the metal clip over and pull the battery out. It's also worth noting that the SIM card is kept inside the battery compartment, and that's in a small black plastic tray here, and you shouldn't need to take the SIM card out, but it's worth knowing where it is. The battery goes back in with a push, make sure the clip is over and clip it in like so. Finally, at the top we have a series of LED lights. These will light up when you turn on, and when you use the GPS. We'll see that in just a moment. There's an audio button which is also used for registering the satellite dish on the network. That's a very important one to remember. We'll come to that in just a moment. And the on and off button, which is here. So the first thing we need to do, we need the satellite dish to know where it is, and it has a built-in GPS system. And to turn it on, just press the button in like so, and you should get two green lights. Now what's going to happen is that the satellite dish will look for a GPS lock, and you'll see all these LED lights flashing up, and eventually the light that's marked GPS will be flashing on its own. And this means it's looking for a lock using the GPS Global Positioning Satellite System. Now, depending on when you last used it, the GPS system will take some time to actually get a lock, but it should achieve it within 2 to 3 minutes at the maximum. If it doesn't, the ideal thing is to move to a different location. You may be surrounded by some high buildings that are blocking the GPS signals, and retry that again. Okay, so now we have our green steady GPS light, and that means we have a good lock onto the GPS system. The BGAN knows where it is, and we need to connect up now to our laptop and to our Glensound codec. To do so, obviously you use Cat5 cables. I've used separate coloured ones so I know which is which. So I'll plug the laptop in first. That goes into the Ethernet connection, which is the small squares in a pyramid. Then the Glensound will go into the bottom one, which is marked ISDN. Push them in firmly so they click and they're secure. So now what we want to do is to start looking for our satellite, and I've set up quite a few BGAN satellite dishes on the roof of Bush House before, so fortunately I know that the satellite that we choose to use is in the south-southeast direction, just over the Thames there. I've got a number of aids that I can use to find the satellite. Primarily on the BGAN itself I have these series of LEDs, and I have a high-pitched bleeping noise, which if I press this button in very briefly, we'll hear. The higher that pitch goes and the quicker it gets, the better the signal. And as that signal gets better, so do the LED lights start lighting up. And we're looking for as many green lights on that LED ladder as we can achieve, and the highest pitch. And I think that's probably our optimum position. Now the other thing I should point out is, as well as pointing it south-southeast, is the angle of elevation, and that's the angle of where you point your dish. And you can check that elevation on this readout here. In London we need to be pointed at about 26 degrees. Once I've achieved the best signal that this BGAN can do with the Inmarsat satellite, I need to register it on the network. And to do that, it's just a case of holding the audio button in for more than 3 seconds. The audio will stop, the GPS light stays steady, but that will go off when you've successfully registered on the network. And the two lights either side of the on and off switch will flash together. Now, most of the time we test the satellite dishes up on the roof of Bush House, we know exactly that we have to point that direction. But if you're in the field somewhere and you have a laptop with you, you can use the BGAN Launchpad software, and we've got it on this laptop here, and it's version 3.9. You'll get the software opening up on the laptop, and in the middle of the screen it's a drop-down box, and you can choose your nearest location. At the moment it says London, but for example, if I was in Mombasa, I would type in MOM, which will give me Mombasa on the drop-down. A small red dot will appear roughly on the global map where Mombasa is, and below we'll be able to read off which satellite we're pointing to, the angle of the antenna, and the compass direction as well. Now, with this version of Launchpad, you don't need to be plugged into the BGAN to find out exactly where you need to point your satellite dish from. So you can use this software before you go onto a trip to find out in which direction you need to point your BGAN satellite. So that's Launchpad version 3.9, and that in a nutshell is how to set up your BGAN to give you a successful transmission back to Bush House.